Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our little education session today. Today we're going to be talking about weightlifting with Laura Jones. I'm Andrea from St. Mark's Hospital and I just wanted to welcome you all here. If you are here from Salt Lake County, the link to register and get points for attending today is in the chat. It's the shorter link that has SurveyMonkey in the name. So be sure and click on that at some point during the class today. I'm going to let Laura introduce herself and get started. So Laura, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Of course, I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about my passion for health and exercise. I'm a registered nurse. I have a master's degree with an emphasis in education and a national certification in education and professional development. I actually started weightlifting or strength training over 20 years ago after delivering my first daughter. And at the time, I couldn't even do a push-up. I could do about 3 crunches, and I was extremely weak. And strength training really changed my body and changed my ability to do what I wanted to do. So I am definitely an advocate of strength training and weightlifting. I was raised with 6 brothers, and they always tease that they're never scared of themselves, of each other, but they are scared of their one sister. So, and I think my passion for exercise and health is directly tied to that. So, this presentation really is based off of my experiences in the past and over the years and the latest research, and spent quite a bit of time weaving through the research on this. There is constantly research being done, so it's many times changes frequently, but this is based off of about 50 different studies and multiple reputable websites that I reviewed. I'm actually, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on the chat, if somebody asks a question, you're welcome to ask a question in the chat. You can bring it up and kind of interrupt me, Andrea, to bring up any questions that are kind of relevant at the moment. If you don't feel that they're relevant at the moment, we will have a question answer session at the very end. Sometimes we have a little trouble with the video, and so I choose to start the video at the beginning, and during the presentation I'll turn my video off just to allow so that there isn't Wi-Fi or internet issues. And then when we get to the question and answer session at the end, I will then turn my video back on. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, there's my disclaimer, and that this information is presented is intended for educational purposes and is not to replace physician or sports professional assessment. And I have no conflict of interest. So our learning objectives is we're going to kind of talk about strength training, benefits and recommendations. We're going to develop kind of a basic understanding of strength training. We'll talk about safety and injury risk and etiquette, and we'll also discuss different resources that you can go to get more information. So the weightlifting paradigm, many people, when they think about weightlifting, they think about sweaty men who are grunting and throwing weights around, lifting really high levels of weight. And I want you to try to drop those preconceived notions, because if you get into strength training or weightlifting, there's all levels in regards to the type of people that do strength training. And even though the weightlifting world can be an intimidating place, we're going to go over the basics and the lingo and the equipment and kind of give you ideas of where to start so that it doesn't feel as intimidating as it can be. Definitely when I started, I had no idea what I was kind of getting myself into, and I didn't do research and I didn't know a lot of information at the time. And so hopefully you can learn from my previous knowledge and the information that I've kind of gotten over the years to help you know how important strength training and weightlifting is. So the vocabulary, all of these different words, weightlifting, muscle strengthening activity, resistance training, and strength training really are used interchangeably. So I might use weightlifting, I might use strength training or resistance training. Really, they all focus on challenging your muscles. And muscles work or hold against an applied force or weight is basically what all of these different words or phrases mean. There are no restrictions in regards to strength training. Every size, shape, and skill level can participate and gain benefits, and really everyone should participate in strength training. There really is no restrictions at all because it's really flexible in how you do it. And we'll talk more about that. It's also, there are no age restrictions. In fact, it's actually more beneficial as we age. And so after about age 30, you actually start losing muscle mass. And then it increases as you get into your 40s and your 50s and your 60s and so on. It's not only do you lose muscle mass, but you also decrease the density in your bones. So strength training actually inhibits that age progression. So it increases the density in your bones, it increases your muscle mass, it helps with mobility, maintaining your independence and preventing injuries. So falling and breaking your hip can really be decreased by strength training. And the statistics actually show that you live longer and maintain your independence more if you do strength training. There was a study that talked about reviewed men in their 60s and a strength training program. And they actually showed that these men would increase their strength by 113% in 12 weeks, which they correlated that these men in their 60s then resembled the amount and strength of men in their 20s. And that was only 12 weeks. So it definitely has the science behind it. There was another study that supported that in regards to bone density and decreasing the risk of fracture and falls as well. And as I mentioned, strength training can be modified based off of your goals. And I just want you to be aware of the basics so that you can avoid injury. It's not absolutely void of injury, but if you're aware, then the injury risk is very, very low. So let's talk about the benefits of strength training. And this is different than like regular exercise or cardiovascular exercise. This is very specific to strength training. So one of the things is that it decreases your risk of heart disease, and it does that by doing a couple things. First, if you're diabetic, it improves your control of your blood sugar, which is key in increasing your risk of heart disease. It also will reduce your body fat. It improves your metabolism actually significantly more than cardiovascular exercise. Your metabolism after you do a session of strength training will actually improve for about 38 hours following that session, compared to about 2 hours of metabolism improvement if you're doing aerobic exercise. So it really will help with that body fat reduction or weight reduction. If you add a pound of muscle, it improves your metabolic rate by by burning about 70 more calories a day. So for every pound of muscle that you add, you decrease or you increase your caloric burn by 70 calories. You also decrease your risk of heart disease by decreasing your blood pressure. It improves your cholesterol, and it improves your stress threshold, which basically means that if you're under like physical or emotional stress, that your likelihood of having a heart attack is significantly less. It also impacts your musculoskeletal system. You avoid that sarcopenia, which is that muscle loss or bone density loss that is natural when you age. It improves your posture. It prevents osteoporosis and decreases your risk of osteoarthritis. Many times people start strength training because they have a particular musculoskeletal condition. For example, like arthritis or low back pain, osteoporosis, if they've had like a joint replacement. And so the research actually shows that it really improves those kinds of musculoskeletal conditions by improving the strength. It reduces pain and improves function. And then finally, strength training also impacts your neurologic system in several ways. It can improve your balance and coordination, increases your energy, it boosts your mood, so decreases on feelings of depression, moodiness, stress, or anxiety. It also improves your cognition, which means that you are able to think better. And it does that by releasing dopamine when you're doing strength training. And in effect, it actually will create new neural pathways, and that's how it kind of improves that cognition. And then finally, it improves your confidence and body image. What's interesting is that a weight loss control program, many times after about a year, about only 10% of participants will be still on that weight control program. In regards to strength training, after a year, 50% are still participating. So it really has a high rate of adherence. And that really could be a result of little wins and progression, which we'll talk about progression in a few minutes. So these are the recommendations, the national guidelines by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in regards to moving your body. And on the left, it kind of talks about aerobic activity and what they recommend aerobic activity. But you can see the other half of that is muscle strengthening activity. And they make a recommendation of doing some sort of a strengthening activity at least 2 days a week. The minimum really is about 20 minutes for those 2 days. But obviously, the more that you do, the better. So, 30 to 40 minutes is even better. And you can accomplish muscle strengthening activity by using your body weight, by using resistant bands, by using free weights or weight machines. And we'll talk more about the equipment as well. So the difference really between aerobic activity is aerobic activity you'll consist really of a continuous activity at a lower resistance, and strength training are higher resistance with few repetitions and brief rest periods. But despite really the benefits that we've kind of talked about and the high rates of adherence, really there's only about a quarter of adults in America that meet these recommendations. One of the things that I've heard many times, especially from women, is that they fear getting too bulky. And I have to mention, especially for women, this is nearly impossible to get too bulky unless you really, really try. And even if you really try, it's very difficult to do just because we are who we are and we have the hormones that we have. For all the years that I've done strength training, I have achieved strength and being toned, but never being bulky. Now, men can get bulky, but it requires effort and specific types of training. So a real basic strength training is not going to get you too bulky. All right, let's go over the basics. So we're going to go all the way down to the basic science of muscles. So we have 642 muscles in your body, and that really works together to keep our bodies moving and standing. And I want you to straighten your arm out, one of your arms. I don't care which one. I want you to straighten your arm out. When you bend your arm, go ahead and bend your elbow like you're bringing your fist up to your face. When you bend your arm, your bicep contracts and your tricep, which is in the back, does the opposite. It elongates in order to let your elbow bend. So if you feel your bicep, you can kind of feel it kind of moving, and that actually contracts. And so this picture kind of shows an example of this. This picture is of a sarcomere, which basically is a filament, a microscopic muscle cell unit that creates that motion. So when you contract your muscle, those filaments on that very first picture, that's a normal filament at a normal length. When you contract, it pushes together, and that's that second picture where it says contracted smooth muscle cell. So it contracts, and then when you relax, it goes back to its original position and length. So really, strength training starts when you move your body weight or pick up a weight beyond what your body's normally used to. It pushes your muscles outside the comfort level. And really doing this over and over will create little micro tears in the muscle. And when those muscles regenerate itself over the next 24 to 48 hours, it rebuilds itself stronger and more resilient. And so that's really the science of how strength training works. So as I mentioned, there's lots of different equipment that you can use to help with strength training, and it's really based off of what you would enjoy or what's available to you. You can use your own body weight. And so the picture of the gentleman doing a push-up is a perfect example of using your own body weight. You have no weight other than your own body that's creating that pressure to build that strength. One of the things that's great about using your own body weight is it's very inexpensive and it's very adaptable. So for example, this push-up, you could start doing a push-up. You know, many times people will just come in and start doing push-ups and they can't even do one, like I couldn't do even a single push-up when I first started. And then you get, you know, upset because you can't even do one and you give up. But think about starting a push-up on a wall. You know, you're 2 feet away from the wall, you put your hands on the wall and you do a push-up on a wall. That's a lot easier push-up than doing it on the ground. So it's very adaptable. So you could start on the wall, you could then get down to a table, then you get down to the floor on your knees like this gentleman, then maybe you're on the floor with on your toes, and then you can even go to one arm versus 2 arms. So you can kind of see how you can adapt the weight and the exercise according to your skill level. And so that's really another great thing about using your own body weight. You can also use weight machines, and that's what the picture of the young lady on the right, she's using a specific machine in the gym to work her triceps. And really, most machines are specific to a single muscle or a muscle group. The great thing about weight machines is that they have instructions, typically right on the machine, that'll tell you how to do an exercise, what kind of exercise, what muscles it's going to be using. And it's also got built-in safety features. If you have a gym membership or are interested in a gym membership, many times if you don't know how to use something, you just need to go ask the staff and they can give you a quick demo or a walkthrough if you're not sure how to use something. And then also you have free weights, which is the gentleman here on the left. And free weights can be barbells or dumbbells like he's using, medicine balls, kettlebells, a resistance band, even using heavy loads. So if you've seen different television shows, a lot of times they'll show these big strong people like moving tires, flipping tires. That would be considered a heavy load. If you're going to real basic, if you're wanting to work out at home, the best recommendation I have is getting a mat, a balance ball, which is kind of like what you would sit on to do like crunches. If you do get a balance ball, make sure that you get the appropriate size for your height. There's actually two sizes. There's one that's for if you're 5'4" and under, and then there's one if you're 5'5" and over. So make sure that you get the right amount. And then you can get a real simple free weight set for about $100. So it's definitely cost effective. And then, then your traditional gym. So whatever works for you. Really, the recommendation by the Department of Health and Human Services and the American College of Sports Medicine is a combination of using not only your own body weight, but also free weights and sometimes weight machines with an emphasis on multi-joint exercises. And that means that you're exercising multiple muscles at the same time, and that really saves time as well. But ultimately, we want you to be comfortable and use what's available. You can really achieve strength and general fitness, whatever option you choose. And the biggest thing that I would emphasize is that you really need to know the equipment that you're using and choosing and how to use it properly before you begin. And then the final thing, equipment, I mentioned here is gloves, trainers, and belts. So gloves, anytime you're doing lifting weights, I actually recommend using gloves. I didn't at the very beginning, and I got calluses on my hands. The other thing is that if you use weightlifting gloves, that not only do you avoid those calluses, but it also helps with your grip to avoid slipping. And then if you're doing kind of heavier weights, or if you're getting more in the intermediate or advanced stage, there are trainers and lifting belts that help support your back and brace your core. Now, the very first thing before you start any kind of strength training is a warm up. And there's several things you can do to warm up. And really, warmed muscles will perform better and it decreases your risk for injury. So you can do dynamic stretching, which is the picture on the top with the girl in kind of the coral pants. So she's doing kind of she's getting down and then she's standing up and then she's getting down, crouching down and then standing up. So that constant movement is called dynamic stretching. You don't want to do like static stretching at the very beginning. The dynamic stretching or the constant movement is what actually warms the muscles and increases your range of motion. You can, if you don't like dynamic stretching, or if you would prefer, you can also do like 5 or 10 minutes on a cardiovascular machine like a treadmill or a rower or an elliptical, depending on what kind of muscles you're working. You can also use light weights, and this is really great, especially if you're short on time. So say you're going to do some bicep curls, but you haven't warmed up yet. If you just take really, really light weights and do 3 or 4 or 5 bicep curls with a very, very light weight, you have warmed up your muscles adequately to then move on to the heavier weights. And then the last thing you can do in regards to warm up is using a foam roller. And that's what the bottom picture kind of shows. It kind of compresses your muscles and moves that roller on the muscles that you're going to be using. So if you ever seen that, that's what those are all about. All right, there are three different components to muscle strengthening or strength training. And the first is intensity, which is how much weight or force you're using. The frequency, which is how often you're doing it. And sets and repetition, which is how many times. And we're going to talk about each one of these in detail. The first concept is, or component, is intensity, which is how much. So how do you know how much weight you should choose? The biggest thing is if you're brand new at it, that we want you to start slowly and gradually increase it. That really will help avoid excessive soreness and injury. If you lift too heavy of a weight, your form will actually suffer. And that really, allowing that starting slow and gradually increase will give your ligaments and tendons time to strengthen and prepare for that heavier weight. This table or this picture shows you three different kinds of ways to know whether you're lifting the appropriate amount of weight. The first column talks about what effort level. And so this is something called perceived exertion. And you really want to be in the moderate hard to hard level. So the number 6 or 7 level. So if you imagined that 0 is no effort and 10 is the most effort you could possibly apply, you want to be in the 6 to 7 range. So sometimes that helps you kind of understand where you are with weight. The second column is repetition maximum. So for some people, this makes more sense than effort level. And what repetition maximum means is that 100% repetition maximum would be the most weight that you could lift in one repetition. So if you can lift, say, 100 pounds and you can only do it one time, that would be 100% repetition maximum. So you really want to stay 60 to 70% of your repetition maximum. So again, if you took 100 pounds and you could only lift it one time, that would be your maximum. So you'd want to lift more like 60 or 70 pounds. And then you do more repetitions because you're lifting less of your maximum. And then your third column is another way that you can determine how much weight you can carry or that you should be lifting. And really that's based off of fatiguing your muscle. And so the goal is for you to complete 8 to 12 repetitions. And if you can complete more than that, then you're not lifting as much weight as you should. You're not exerting your muscle as much as you should. And if you are failing at like 4 or 5, then you're doing too much. So you really, again, want to be in that being able to do 4 or 5 more reps after you finish. So say you did 12 reps and you feel like, oh, I definitely could do 4 or 5 more, then you're right at the appropriate weight. If you feel like you could do less or a lot more, then you need to adjust your weight accordingly. The last thing I wanted to mention is that it's really important on basic strength training that you fatigue your muscle, but you don't exhaust your muscle. You don't want to fail your muscle to fail. If you're pushing it to failure, then you're doing too much weight. We want to kind of be in a happy medium. The second component is frequency. And this is how often, again, that you're doing the strength training. And we recommend twice weekly to start. We want to work your entire body using every major muscle group. There is no such thing as spot reduction with weight training. We want you to do the entire body. If you overwork just one muscle group, it actually can lead to imbalance and injury. So when you strengthen a muscle, let's just say your bicep, again, you're going to do a crunch. You're lifting your weight on your bicep. You not only want to hit your bicep, but you also want to hit the back of your arm or your tricep as well. So that creates balance and avoids injury. We want you to start with one exercise per body part. You never want to strength train the same body part on consecutive days. So you don't want to go on Monday and hit your quadriceps and then go on Tuesday and hit your quadriceps again. You need your body and your muscles need time to recover. So the general rule is about 48 hours between workouts. This table kind of is an example of what they recommend. If you're brand new to strength training, they recommend again up to about 3 days a week. As you advance, you can increase to 3 to 4 days a week and advanced 4 to 6 days a week. But again, the rule with that 24 to 48 hours of rest between different groups still applies. So when I was first starting, I would go 2 days a week and I would work my entire body on Monday, and then I work the entire body on Thursday. And then as I started advancing, I went to 4 days a week and I would do the upper body on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I do my lower body on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's kind of just an example of how you can advance in frequency. And the last component of strength training is sets and repetitions, and this is the duration. So a repetition is one complete exercise movement. It's one crunch. It's one push-up. A set is a certain number of the repetitions. So for example, I mentioned you should kind of be shooting for about 8 to 12 reps, and that is one set. And so many times people will do 8 to 12 repetitions, and then they'll rest for 2 to 3 minutes, and then they'll do another set of 8 to 12 repetitions. You want to rest about 2 to 3 minutes in between sets to allow your muscle to kind of recover. If you're decreasing the rest time, say you're only allowing 30 to 60 seconds rest, then that actually will inhibit you from being able to lift that same amount of weight again. And then you want to progress to more reps each week, and then you can actually add sets onto that as well. The last few repetitions should be difficult to lift. If it's easy, again, add repetitions or wait because you're not adequately challenging your muscles. You can increase the weight if you do more than your set number of repetitions for 2 consecutive trainings. So let's say that you're lifting 30 pounds and you do 3 sets of 12 repetitions, and you do that on Monday and Wednesday. The next week, you can actually increase your weight to maybe 35 pounds because you've already proven that your muscles can handle that. All right, I wanted to talk about a concept called progressive overload. And this is why I think that there is a high retention rate amongst those that do strength training because of this concept. And really, progressive overload is doing a little bit more each time. It pushes the body's capabilities, the body adapts and gets stronger. And so if you're doing the same thing, there is no progression. If you do strength training, if you're lifting that 30 pounds and you're always doing 10 repetitions and 2 sets, you will never, never, never change. You're not pushing the body's limits. So really, progressive overload is improving over time. And you can do this by increasing the weight, like we've kind of mentioned, in small increments. You can increase the number of repetitions. You can increase the number of sets, like from 2 sets to 3 sets. You can increase the frequency, like the days, like I've mentioned, like I was on Monday and Thursday, and then I went 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I went 4 days a week. I went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that is a way to progress. You can decrease the rest time between sets. So instead of 2 to 3 minutes, you can decrease that to 1 minute. But again, that will decrease the ability to lift. And we'll talk a little bit more about goals in regards to strength training and the different changes that you can do accordingly. And then you can also do a harder variation. So like I mentioned earlier about a push-up, you can make it more difficult by making that variation or that change in the way that you do it. And then you can also adjust the tempo. Generally, you want to be about a moderate, slow to moderate tempo. So you want to lift over 2 to 3 seconds. So contract the muscle for 2 to 3 seconds and then relax the muscle for 2 to 3 seconds. So that's the typical tempo. So you can adjust it by even slowing it down even more or adding a pause, and that will actually challenge your muscle as well. Form and technique is extremely important in regards to weightlifting, not only to avoid injury, but it actually makes your results better by doing it in the correct form. So make sure that you know how to do whatever exercise you choose to do, that you adjust the machines if you're using weight control or weight machines, lifting machines, according to your size. You want to be able to adjust it according, like this girl in the picture, her joints are being bent in the right appropriate way. She's, adjusted the back according to how long her legs are. So all of the weight machines are adjusted accordingly. You want to have proper posture. You want to be upright. You want to keep your chest high, your abs tight, and you want to do full range of motion. So you don't want to do tiny little movements. You want to go as the largest amount of range of motion as possible. You want to start at lower repetitions. Focus on your form and then increase your repetition as you get a hold of your form, because if your form actually will break down as you get tired. So that's why you kind of want to keep the repetitions and slowly increase those. If you ever are lifting a weight or doing some sort of strength training and you feel sharp or stabbing pain, you want to stop. That's actually a sign of injury. Now there's a feeling called muscle soreness or acute muscle soreness. That's that burn that you get during exercise. That's a buildup of lactic acid that will stop after you end the exercise. That's normal. It's the sharp or stabbing pain that's not normal. Another thing that you want to make sure that you do is breathe. Now, you don't want to hold your breath. That can actually cause you to be dizzy and faint. So how you breathe when you lift or doing strength training is you exhale when you are doing the contraction or the lift. So let's say that you're laying on your back and you're doing a chest press and you're lifting weights up above your body. You want to breathe out as you push the weight up, and then you breathe in as you lower the weight. So I like to think about that when it's most difficult. I want to blow that difficulty out of my mouth. Okay. So contraction, blow out, relaxation, inhale. I mentioned about performing exercises at that slow or moderate velocity. Really what you're trying to do is avoid momentum, because if you're allowing momentum to happen, then you're not actually allowing your muscles to work at the maximum amount. You really want to force the muscles to develop those fibers and grow. And so that avoiding momentum will help you with that. also avoiding lockout. If you've ever done like a lunge or a squat, people will come out of those and they'll lock their knees, or they're lifting weights above their heads and they lock their elbows. That actually transfers the weight from your muscles to your bones. And when you do that, you're not maintaining that high level of intensity, and will kind of cheat yourself out of the benefits. So kind of keep that in mind. And then finally, eating and drinking. Hydration, getting plenty of water will help. And then protein has actually been proven to help build and repair your muscles. So that's always, especially if it's a longer workout, to do that.
Laura, we have
Yeah.
a question in the chat.
Okay.
The question is that injuries are their biggest concern about strength training.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone they know who's done regular weightlifting has had injuries at some point. This person says they feel like they have no confidence that they can figure out the right form for each exercise. So how do you figure out the right form to avoid injuries?
So I'm not going to like talk about specific exercises per se. I'm going to kind of give you some advice, and then you kind of decide what you're comfortable with. And then at the very end of the presentation, I'm actually going to give you 2 resources where you can go and actually watch a video or read step by step on how to do a specific exercise. So I always recommend know what exercises you're going to do before you do them, because then you've done your homework, you've done your research so that you're doing it correctly. I think actually for most novices and intermediate, weight training has the most decrease in injury than most exercising, but form is huge. And so you really have to do your homework. If you're doing your homework and you're not lifting weights that are too heavy, then you're going to be okay. I literally have never had an injury regards to strength training. Now, have I had an injury with running? Yes. Have I had an injury when I was swimming? Yes. And so at least my experience is if you are doing your homework and you educate yourself, you're going to be okay. What I see with the injuries are the people that go in, they don't know what they're doing, they haven't done their homework, and they go and they try to lift double what they really should be lifting. And then you're going to get injured. So absolutely, we'll kind of go over that at the very end as well. Thank you for the question. Did that answer it?
I hope so. I'll keep an eye on the chat and let you know if there's further questions.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a great table that kind of compares. We've talked about using free weights and machines and body weight. And so this gives you kind of an example of a whole body workout using different types of equipment. And you don't have to stick with one or the other. So you don't have to do all free weights. You don't have to do all body weight. You can actually mix it up. You can do some, you can do your chest and back with free weights. You can do, your triceps and biceps with machines, and you can use quads and hamstrings with body. So you can definitely mix it up. In fact, they actually recommend the American College of Sports Medicine and the Department of Health and Human Services actually recommend mixing it up. And so we'll kind of go over those resources that I mentioned. Couple things lingo wise I wanted you to be aware of. There's something called split training versus full body, and that's what I mentioned in regards to full body would be doing it on Monday and Wednesday. Split training is upper body like on Tuesday and Thursday, lower on Monday, Wednesday. So that's that split training versus full body. Compound exercises versus isolation. Compound is multiple muscle groups being done. So if you're doing a squat or a lunge versus an isolation exercise, which is just a single muscle being exercised. Concentric, isometric, and eccentric is what the picture shows. So concentric is the lift, the isometric is the hold, no movement, and eccentric is the relaxation phase. Failure, I mentioned, is if you fully fatigued your muscle and you can't perform any other reps. And if you're doing basic strength training, you need to avoid this. This is really only an advanced move. And then spotter is someone who is an exercise partner that kind of offers a hand if you're needed. Another thing that's important with strength training is doing a cool down. And that's where your static stretching, your hold stretching is important, where you ease into the stretch slowly to the point that you feel that gentle pull, and you hold it for 30 to 40 seconds and you do not bounce, okay? And that helps with flexibility. It will help with soreness. And so it's really important to do that cool down, and you really just cool down or do that stretch of whatever muscles that you worked in that particular session. Rest and recovery for 48 hours to allow that muscle to heal. And then there's something called DOMS, or DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. This is normal. It's that result of those little tiny tears in the muscles from that strength training. It typically will develop around 12 to 24 hours afterwards, and it peaks about 48 hours afterwards, and then will kind of improve. And this is if you lifted too much weight and on your quadriceps, you did too many lunges, or you were holding too heavy of weights. I mean, you kind of still expect it when you're first starting, and you can't even sit down on the toilet because your quadriceps are just mad at you. So really, movement is the best cure. You can do massage, or you can do some sort of a bath, whether that's a cold bath or a warm bath. There's no science that says one's better over the other. And then to avoid or minimize, make sure you stay hydrated, that you warm up and cool down, and that you really ease into training. Couple considerations I wanted to mention. You may consider a personal trainer, because they do your homework for you. So if you're not one that wants to do homework, or that you're worried about your form, and you don't want to get injured, most gyms actually offer an introductory personal trainer for free the very first time. So they will help you and know what is best for you and give you kind of a training program. This really speeds up your learning curves, and will provide real-time feedback on your form and some accountability. Just make sure if you do choose a personal trainer that they are professionally certified in one of the 4 associations. Safety-wise, make sure you're warming up and cooling down. That can avoid your injury. That you're working at the right tempo, as I mentioned, 2 seconds up, 2 seconds down, or 3 seconds up and 3 seconds down. That you're also breathing, that out when you lift, in when you relax, that you're allowing recovery time. You don't want to do those same muscles back to back. That's just asking for trouble. And then focusing on your form, not on the weight. We want to get your form and your repetitions started. Only increase your weight when you have your form and your repetitions down. Now, in regards to injury, I kind of mentioned it already. The 2 most common injuries is a muscle strain, and that's typically, again, improper execution of exercises or using excessive weight. The other one is some sort of a herniation or bulging of the disc. So back injury is a common injury, but those are typically done on these 2 exercises, which are deadlifts and squats. So if you've got like a back injury history, I would never ever do a deadlift and squat. And that's because you're kind of leaning forward, and that really increases the compression on the lumbar spine. So again, correct posture and form. Make sure that you're doing your homework. If you choose to do a deadlift and squat, I would definitely recommend a protective back brace. And then if you do have a muscle strain or a back injury, it's really rest, and you may consider maybe a different sport like swimming. All right, a couple mentions about gym etiquette. We're getting near the end here. Some rules are really meant to keep you and others safe and comfortable. So if you choose to start strength training in a gym atmosphere, make sure you come with clean body and clothes. Nothing worse than someone who comes and they're not clean, or they've got, clothes that they're using for the third time. That's poor etiquette. Make sure that you have a towel. If it's not provided by the gym, bring a towel. Make sure that you're covering and wiping down equipment and being hygienic. We don't want you to drop weights. The only exception is those that are really training for Olympic type lifting. And it actually is dangerous for them to not drop their weights the way that is done. But that is few and far between. Make sure you put your equipment away and that you re-rack. You don't want to block equipment, walkways, or others' views. So standing in front of a set of dumbbells so nobody else can get to them. Doing a stretch in a walkway so people are walking over you, or getting in front of others who are trying to use a mirror. Now, I always thought when I first started, I'm like, why are these people looking at themselves while they're in the mirror? And that has to do with form. They're really checking their form to make sure that they're doing it correctly. So that's the reason behind the mirrors. Make sure that you give people space. It takes space depending on the type of exercise they're doing. You don't want to get hurt by getting too close. And don't stare. It kind of makes you the creepy one. Make sure equipment is free. You don't want to hog it. So kind of look for signs that something is being used. The general rule is you should never be away from your equipment for longer than 60 seconds. So if you leave your towel on there and you go get a drink, just make sure you're back within 60 seconds, or you shouldn't be saving that equipment. Cell phone courtesy. You don't want to have loud conversations. You don't want to be scrolling while you're sitting on a piece of equipment, stopping other people from using it. If you're doing pictures or filming, make sure that you're careful that you're not getting other people in that selfie or whatever. Working in guidelines. If you have a piece of equipment and someone is using it and you're trying to get into it, you can go ask if you can alternate sets with them. If they say no, then you're just going to have to wait. If they say yes, then you do your set, you jump off, they get on, do their set, they jump off, and so on. Barbell safety. Make sure you're using the right barbell. There's actually different weight barbells. And if you're using a very light barbell that is meant for light weights and you put really heavy weights on them, that can be an issue. And then if you ever are using a barbell, when you unload it, you alternate sides. So if you have 20 pounds on one side and 20 pounds on the other, you want to take 10 off one side, 10 off the other, 10 off the final side, and so on, alternating. And then don't call attention to yourself. Don't yell, don't scream, don't swear. That's extremely annoying. Couple beginner tips. Make sure you don't be intimidated. Most people are either feeling timid like you, or they're focused on their own workout and don't even notice. Set yourself up for success by blocking out time in your calendar, lifting to great music. Do your homework by deciding what exercise you want to do and make sure that you watch a video or know how to do them. Start a gym log by keeping track of your reps or your sets and what weight you use for each exercise, how it feels. That kind of helps you know how you're progressing. Stay consistent. It takes just a few weeks to start seeing a difference. Keeping it simple. Don't keep overcomplicate it. Focus on those classic compound exercise and have fun. If you are more than a beginner, a couple things I wanted to mention to make it harder is try different variations. You can change the angle of exercises to make them harder. Like I mentioned with push-ups, start on the wall, progress to a table, progress to the floor, try one arm. You can also try circuit training, which is kind of a set of drills. You go through a set of drills, you complete the last one, and then you start all over again. Power moves are bursts. So you do a squat and then you jump in the air, and then you do a squat and then you jump in the air, or so where you're adding power to body weight movements. You can decrease your rest time in between, and you can increase your speed. And that helps create more force. The last thing I wanted to talk about is training based on goals. And we've talked about basic strength training, but say you want to, maybe you're into endurance training and you're going to be running a triathlon and you want to improve your strength. That's where you would want to do a little bit different training based off of the fact that your goal is endurance. So for endurance, it would be lighter weights, more repetitions. If you're wanting to increase your muscle mass, so look larger, that doesn't necessarily mean increase strength, it's just increase mass, then you manipulate your volume, you increase your weight, your speed, and so that kind of talks about those different things. And then power as well, different levels of thoughts according to what your goals are. There is some nutritional supplementation and there's a lot of communication out there. These are not name brands, they're just active ingredients. There really are only 4 that are absolutely science supported, no question asked. And the first one's creatinine, that increases your capacity and muscle mass, and you would typically take that before you lift. There's something called HMB, which is beta hydroxy methylbutyrate. That's an amino acid that will improve your mass and strength. The recommended amount for that is 1 gram 3 times a day. Leucine is another amino acid that aids in recovery, and so that's something that you would take after, and that promotes repair and regrowth of new muscle tissue. And then I already mentioned protein. That decreases the muscle damage that you have. It's typically recommended after, and the amount is 1.4 to 2 grams per kilo per day. These are the resources that I would encourage you to go to for more information. The American College of Sports Medicine has all of the research and the guidelines. The Mayo Clinic actually has those slideshows and videos on the technique, on the different exercises. It also has articles and tips. The American Council on Exercise has information on finding a certified trainer, and you can actually look up exercises by body part, by experience, and by equipment. So if you're looking to see what kind of exercises for biceps, it will show you all of those as you narrow it down. The National Association of Sports Medicine has a blog that has educational exercises and also has a survey called PAR-Q. So especially if you're older than 40, it asks a whole bunch of questions, and if you answer yes to 1 or more questions, it actually will refer you to follow up with a physician. And then the last one is the Strong app. It has video examples of how to perform each exercise, and it's really brilliant for beginners and those that are just getting started in the weight room. So those are my references, lots and lots of them. This is where I can take questions for a few minutes.
You can put your questions in the chat, and then either Laura or I will see them. And if you are a county employee, then Sadie will have a copy of this presentation for you. If you're not with Salt Lake County, just let me know in the chat and I'll make sure a copy of the presentation gets sent to you.
While we're waiting for any questions, thank you so much for letting me share my information with you. And I hope that you've kind of come across with knowing that this is okay, that you can go in, do your homework, make sure that you choose 6 or 7 exercises that you're going to focus on, that you get your form understood, that you watch those videos using those resources, and that because the benefits are just so huge with strength training, and it's just as important as cardiovascular training.
One of the questions we have in the chat is there a better time of day to do your strength training?
So not necessarily, but one of the things that's important is that you do the harder exercises at the beginning. So let's say that you're doing a full body workout and you've chosen to do squats and lunges. Those work multiple muscles at the same time. So you want to do the squats and lunges at the very beginning of your workout and do the easier exercises at the end. Because your body fatigues, you want to do those harder ones at the beginning. In regards to day, whether you do it in the morning or at night, not necessarily. If you had a really hard job and you were doing a lot of labor or something like that during the day, I wouldn't recommend doing it at night because then your body's going to be fatigued, and then your form may suffer. But really, those are the only considerations. Good question.
Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and it is 1 o'clock, so I think we will wrap up here. Thank you so much, Laura. That was very interesting. I learned a lot from it, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye,
Good night.
everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.